Today we're telling a story about mold. Yes, mold. Not regular mold, but a special type of mold that would go on to save more lives than any other discovery in medical history. No pressure, fungus. Imagine this. It's London, September 1928. A Scottish bacteriologist named Alexander Fleming returns from holiday to find his lab in a state of disarray. One of his petri dishes was left uncovered, which is bound to happen when you are too busy trying to find your flip-flops. This petri dish had sprouted an uninvited guest, a fuzzy, blue-green mold. Now, a lesser scientist would have tossed it in the bin and planned lunch, but Fleming looked closer. The mold appeared to be killing the bacteria around it, not just nudging them aside politely, destroying them, dead. Fleming, ever the pragmatist, named the bacteria-slaying substance Penicillin and published his findings. And then he basically shrugged and moved on. You see, while Fleming could see that something remarkable was happening, he couldn't extract enough of the stuff to make it actually useful. He lacked the chemistry skills, the equipment, and frankly, the motivation to turn moldy petri dish goo into practical medicine. So he filed it under interesting laboratory curiosity and went back to his other work. For a decade, penicillin sat in scientific journals like a forgotten moldy sandwich. Enter Howard Florey, one of Australia's great exports. Born in Adelaide, Florey spent most of his career at Oxford. By 1938, he'd assembled a formidable team, including the brilliant German biochemist Ernst Chain. Chain had been rummaging through old journals, which is what scientists did before they had the internet to procrastinate with, when he stumbled across Fleming's decade-old paper. He brought it to Florey with the scientific equivalent of, "Mate, check this out." Florey's response? "Let's have a crack at it." What followed was one of the great equipment improvisation sessions in history. The team grew penicillin mold in anything they could find. Glass bottles tipped on their sides, food tins, and, naturally, hospital bedpans. Because when you're trying to save humanity, dignity is negotiable. By early 1940, they developed a complete extraction process. It was artisanal pharmaceutical production, if you will. Output was minuscule, but it worked. On May 25, 1940, Florey performed an experiment that would change everything. He injected 8 mice with a lethal dose of Streptococcus bacteria. 4 received penicillin, 4 did not. 24 hours later, the 4 untreated mice were dead. The 4 treated mice were gloriously alive. Florey reportedly stared at those surviving mice in amazement. The first human patient was police constable Albert Alexander, who developed a catastrophic facial infection. By the time Florey saw him, his face was swollen to the size of a cantaloupe. He was, in medical terms, absolutely stuffed. Within 24 hours of receiving penicillin, Alexander began to recover. The team watched in amazement as the infection retreated, and then they ran out of penicillin. The drug worked perfectly, but only if you had enough of it. This was the greatest proof of concept in medical history, followed by the worst supply chain failure. Unfortunately, Britain was too preoccupied in 1941 to fund large-scale penicillin production. Florey packed his bags and flew to America, the land of industrial-sized everything. He arrived in New York in June 1941 and proceeded to charm, cajole, and basically harangue his way through the American scientific establishment. He ended up in Illinois at the USDA's Northern Regional Research Laboratory. A researcher there had a brilliant idea. What if instead of growing mold on the surface of liquid, you submerged it in enormous vats? Deep fermentation, like beer production. The breakthrough strain of penicillin they found, it came from a moldy cantaloupe at a farmer's market. That's right, the drug that would save millions came from someone's discarded groceries. After Pearl Harbor brought America into the war, things started to move rather quickly. Companies like Pfizer, famous for making citric acid, pivoted to produce industrial quantities of penicillin. Within 2 years, the U.S. was producing tons of penicillin. The drug saved hundreds of thousands of lives during the war alone. During all this, Chain, always the pragmatist of the group, suggested that Oxford should patent their production methods, not out of greed, but defense. If we don't patent it, he argued, someone else will. Florey took the matter to Sir Henry Dale, chairman of the Wellcome Trust, who dropped his tea in outrage. Patent medical research? Profit from saving lives? Absolutely not. The moral economy of British science had spoken, with all the commercial savvy of a monastery. Fleming filed no patents. Florey filed no patents. The drug that would be called the greatest life-saving discovery in history entered the world completely unprotected, offered freely to humanity like a gift. Unfortunately, the Americans had no such scruples. U.S. pharmaceutical companies like Merck, Pfizer, and others filed patents on the deep fermentation processes they'd developed. Not on penicillin itself, which couldn't be patented, but on the industrial methods of making it at scale. The outcome? British and Australian institutions that wanted to manufacture penicillin had to pay royalties to American companies. Royalties on a drug whose safety and effectiveness had been demonstrated by an Australian scientist at a British university. Chain never let Florey forget it, and honestly, who could blame him? Fleming and Florey gave the world a miracle. The Americans monetized the factory. You may be tempted to feel aggrieved until you remember that those factories saved millions of lives, and perhaps that was always the point. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep imagining.